We all know the city of Athens, but have you ever stopped to think about where that name actually came from? Well, it wasn't just picked out of a hat. The story is, well, it's an epic one. We're talking about a high-stakes showdown between two of the biggest names on Mount Olympus, both vying for the ultimate prize, to be the patron god of this incredible city. And this story, it's so much more than just a cool myth. It gets at a really big question, right? How does a city, or any group of people really, decide its own future, its own identity? And the place where this all went down, it's the one place you think of when you picture Athens, the Acropolis. The stage was literally set on that iconic rock. So here's what we're going to get into. We'll start with the contest itself. Then we'll look at the two gifts, the sea versus the olive. Then things get really interesting with two totally different versions of how the winner was picked. We'll also cover the aftermath because, oh boy, there was drama. And finally, we'll dig into what this whole story really meant to the people of Athens. All right, let's dive in. Picture this. We're going way, way back. So far back that the city of Athens wasn't even called Athens. It was brand new, just starting out, and like any new venture, it needed a powerful backer, a divine patron to look out for it. And who was in charge? The very first king, a guy named Cecrops. And he wasn't your average king. The myths say he was literally born from the earth, part human on top, part serpent on the bottom. Kind of wild, right? Anyway, it's during his rule that two major deities show up on his doorstep, both saying, "This city, it's mine." So, you can see where this is going. A divine showdown was inevitable. In one corner, you've got Poseidon, the heavyweight champion of the seas, earthquakes, you name it. And in the other corner, you have Athena, the goddess of wisdom, warfare strategy, and all things clever. The rules were simple. Each god presents one gift. The best gift wins the city. And their gifts could not have been more different. Poseidon goes for this big, flashy display of raw power. He creates a spring of salt water. Athena, on the other hand, she goes for something quieter, more practical. She gives them a single tree. But this wasn't just any tree. So right there on the Acropolis, you had two completely different paths for the city's future, laid out for everyone to see. Just try to imagine what that must have looked like. The poet Ovid gives us this incredible image. Poseidon shows up, hefts this massive trident, and just slams it into the rock of the Acropolis. And right from that spot, salt water just erupts. It's a huge power move, right? He's basically saying, I control the seas, and I can give you that power. Athena's move, though, totally different vibe. No big explosion, no drama. She just calmly calls over King Cecrops, to make sure he's watching. She taps the ground with her spear, and poof, up sprouts the world's very first olive tree. It was a promise not of power, but of prosperity. Food, oil, wood. Basically everything you need for a peaceful life. Okay, so there you have it. Two miracles right next to each other. A spring of seawater and a brand new olive tree. Which one do you pick? I mean, how do you even begin to decide? Well, this is where the story gets really, really cool. Because there isn't just one answer. The ancients actually told this story in two different ways. The main version, the one you hear most often, says the gods themselves stepped in to judge. The whole Olympian crew acted like a divine jury. But there's another version, and personally, I find this one fascinating, that says nope, the gods stayed out of it. The decision was actually made by the people of the city through a vote. So, let's look at version 1 first. Zeus basically calls court into session. He gets all 12 Olympians together to figure this out. And who do they call as their star witness? Our guy, King Cecrops. They put him on the stand, and he just tells them what he saw. Yep, I saw Athena plant that olive tree. And just like that, case closed. The gods rule in her favor. And what's really key here is that the testimony of a mortal, a human, well, half-human king, was what tipped the scales for the gods. His word was enough. That sealed the deal, Athena won, and the city got its name, Athens. But wait a minute. What if the gods had nothing to do with it? What if the fate of this city wasn't decided up in the clouds on Mount Olympus, but right there, on the ground, by the people who actually had to live with the consequences? That brings us to version 2, and this one has a twist. So in this version, King Cecrops decides to let the people choose. He calls for a vote, and get this, everyone got to vote, men and women. The results came in, and it was a clean split. Every single man voted for Poseidon, the god of sea, power, and conquest. And every single woman voted for Athena, the goddess offering peace and stability. And the final tally was incredibly close. It turns out there was just one more woman than there were men. So by a single vote, just one, the women's choice won out. One vote determined the future of the city, its patron god, its name, everything. Athena wins again, but this time it was the people's choice. Okay, so Athena wins. Whether it was the god's decision or the people's, she's the victor. But let's not forget about Poseidon, the god of the sea, with a temper as stormy as, well, the sea. And to put it mildly, he did not take losing well. In that first story, where the gods judged against him, his reaction is just pure, destructive rage. He's so furious that he basically unleashes a tsunami, flooding the entire plain around the city, sinking the land of Attica under the sea. It was a terrifying temper tantrum, a show of what happens when you cross him. But the aftermath of the second version, the one with the vote, is where things get really, really tragic. To appease Poseidon's anger after he lost the election, the men of the city came up with a solution. And that solution was to punish the very people who won the day for Athena, the women. They took away their right to vote. They decreed that children would no longer take their mother's name. They even took away their right to be called Athenian women. What a terrible, ironic price to pay for making the winning choice. But even with all this anger and punishment, Athena's gift, that olive tree, became this powerful symbol of hope. And it wasn't just in the myth. Centuries later, during the Persian Wars, invaders actually did burn the Acropolis. They destroyed everything, including that sacred olive tree. But the story goes that the very next day, a little green shoot had already sprouted from the blackened stump. It was a sign that you could burn Athens, but you could never, ever kill it. So when you peel back the layers, you see this contest was so much more than just a cool story about the gods. For the Athenians, it was like looking at a mirror. It reflected all of their biggest questions and debates about who they were, how their city should be run, and why their society was structured the way it was. Think about it. The choice between the olive and the sea wasn't just theoretical. It was a real political debate. For a long time, some leaders pointed to the myth and said, see, we're supposed to be a land-based power, focused on agriculture, just like Athena wanted. But then, later on, guys like Themistocles came along and said, no, our future is on the water. We need to embrace Poseidon's gift and become a naval superpower. The myth became a political tool. And what about that second version, with the women's vote and the punishment? Well, that served a huge purpose too. It was a way to explain a massive contradiction in their own society. How could their city be named after an incredibly powerful goddess, Athena, while the actual women of Athens had almost no rights? This story gave them an answer, a justification. It's because of that one vote long ago that things are the way they are now. At the end of the day, the contest for Athens is a perfect example of how myths aren't just bedtime stories. They are powerful tools used to shape a culture, to explain its identity, and to justify its social order. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What are the big stories we tell ourselves today to explain who we are and why our world works the way it does?